Welcome to the Evolution Partners podcast, where I talk with the world's leading thinkers, planners, and doers who are helping to build great companies in their own way. We learn how the work they're doing is creating an impact and get to know a little bit more about them and what makes them tick. This episode is brought to you by Evolution Partners, where we help leaders to confidently build enduring great companies using our proven, structured, strategic planning process that ensures you build and execute the right plan. Check us out at evolutionpartners.com.au. Also, you can check out our books, Made to Thrive, outlining how to be a great CEO, as well as Onboarded, which is about making your new hires more effective faster. Joey Coleman helps companies keep their customers and employees. As an award-winning speaker, he shares his first 100 days methodology for improving customer and employee retention with organisations around the world, with companies like Whirlpool, Volkswagen Australia, and Zappos. His two books have received critical acclaim, and both were instant Wall Street Journal bestsellers. Never Lose a Customer Again shows how to turn any sale into a lifelong customer. And his newest book, Never Lose an Employee Again, details a framework companies around the world can use to reduce turnover and increase employee engagement. Joey, welcome back. Thanks for joining me today.
Brad, thanks so much for having me back. I appreciate the invitation. It's fun to be a repeat guest, and thanks to everybody who hopefully got a chance to hear the first episode and has decided they want to hear some more. I love it.
Our first repeat guest, so it is great to have you back. Obviously, for those listening, last time we spoke about Never Lose a Customer Again. This is today about Joey's second book, Never Lose an Employee Again. But before we jump into that, Joey, I've caught you, I think 9 or 8 days after you've finished a sabbatical. Tell us about that, because I can guarantee one thing, probably a lot of people in the audience would love to have a sabbatical.
Yeah, I having just completed a 3-month sabbatical where I did no work, no emails, no phone calls, no interactions in a work-related capacity in any way, shape, or form. I highly recommend it for everyone. I feel very fortunate that I was able to take one. The reason I took it was for some health issues. I had been struggling with some health issues last year and finally got convergence of all my various medical doctors and advisors and specialists who concluded that I needed to do a dramatic reset physically, mentally, and emotionally of my body and take some time off. And so I did. And what I will say is, I had this realization, Brad, that the last time I had 3 months in the calendar where I didn't have anything planned, like literally nothing planned whatsoever, I was about 8 years old. And I'm a lot older than 8 years old now. It had been decades. I'm in my early 50s. It had been decades since I had last taken time off. And so I'm super excited to be back at it. I'm super excited to have yours be one of the first shows that I've been on since my sabbatical, and excited to dive into the conversation about employee experience and maybe even some things about lessons learned from my time off that we can apply as employers and as leaders when dealing with our team members.
I'm going to get to that in 1 second. Why should listeners consider a 3-month sabbatical?
Well, depending on where in the world you are listening, different countries have different approaches and different philosophies to time off work. One of the things I have always admired about my Aussie friends is how often Aussies, sweeping stereotype here, will take time off, will take time to go on a walkabout, will take time to travel after uni, after, a job transition, etc. Doesn't happen in the United States nearly as much. In the United States, lots of time, and I know this is increasingly becoming the case in Australia and in other parts of the world, you give notice and your last day is Friday and you start on your new job on Monday, right? And so I do think there's this remarkable opportunity for us to think more intentionally about our time off, how often we're taking it, how regularly we're taking it, and what we're doing, or rather not doing as it may be, when we are taking this time off. I will say I was 5 or 6 weeks into my 3 months off before I quit waking up in the morning thinking I need to check my email. Before I quit, found myself thinking, midday, I really need to do something today. And so it took weeks of nothing on the calendar for me to start to decondition myself from believing that I had to be doing in order to be living, instead of just being in order to keep living.
That's brilliant. And so now looking forward, what's your perspective on your own thoughts on a future sabbatical?
It is 100% going to happen. What I am working to figure out is how to make extended time off happen more frequently than it has for me in the past. So one of the things I'm considering, and I'm happy to throw, this is a work in progress, folks, right? But one of the things I'm considering is, what would it look like to take 4 to 12 weeks off every summer, right? As a general rule, many people in the summer are taking vacation. They're going on trips. They're spending time with their kids. Kids are out of school. They're hanging out and doing family time. Who says I have to work all of those days? As an entrepreneur, I'm the one who's saying that. Now, granted, I recognize the practical reality and the place of privilege that taking time off comes from when you say, like, well, you need to be able to survive and you need to be able to live. But what was interesting is I was working unbelievable amounts of time during the year, but not taking the time off. I was generating the revenue that would allow for me to take time off and not feel an impact financially in my personal life. And yet I wasn't actually taking the time off. When writing Never Lose an Employee Again, one of the things we looked at is company vacation policies. And there's so many companies in recent years that have gone to unlimited vacation. The problem with that is when they announced those policies and said you get unlimited vacation, paid vacation, take as much as you want, employees wouldn't take it because the culture said, well, we may have unlimited vacation, but you got to keep advancing. You got to hit your numbers. You got to get your promotion. And so the smartest companies that I've found now are saying you have unlimited vacation and you are required to take 5 days a quarter.
Yeah.
And if you're not putting in for what your 5 days are, your manager will come to you and say, by the way, in 2 weeks, you're taking the whole week off, whether you want to or not. If some of us, I put myself in this category, don't have enough self-discipline on our own to necessarily identify I should be taking more time off, then we need to have the other people in our organization saying, I need you to do this. And the last thing I'll say on this, Brad, and this is stuff I'm sure you know and from your research and your work, employees have a tendency to follow the leader in the area of vacation. And if the leader never takes a vacation, then the employees don't think it's acceptable to take a vacation. My team, when they saw me taking time off, it sends a message that it's okay for them to take time off too. And we have unlimited paid vacation in my business.
Yeah.
And I'd say if I haven't done the math yet to fully log it. It's something I'm looking at right now to go back and look at time taken off in the last year for other folks. But the reality is it's not nearly as much as you think it'll be when you make it unlimited.
Yeah. Thank you for steering us back on course. We could talk about the virtues of taking time off forever, but what we've really got here is two people who've spent a couple of years each writing books about onboarding. And what I'm really curious about is your take on the onboarding for employees process. In your experience, how would you describe the average employee onboarding process that you've come across?
Well, fascinatingly enough, Brad, I would not use the word that there is a process to describe what the average experience is, right? I think the average employee onboarding is haphazard at best. It is shorter than it needs to be. They try to cover more things than an employee will ever need to know in a really short period of time. And very quickly in most organizations, you are expected to just get it or just to know how to do it, even if you've never been shown it. And then when you don't do it the way the SOP outlines, the way the organization believes you should, the way the culture says you should, organizations and leaders get frustrated. When the reality is they should be frustrated with themselves for not doing a better job of onboarding the new member of the team.
One of the things that struck me, I remember when I was writing my book, one of the largest private employers in this country is a company called BHP. They're a big mining company. And there was a person I was talking, an executive at an event, and I was asked what I was occupied with. I said I was writing a book about onboarding. And that person said, I don't know who my manager is. I don't know what my job is. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And it just really struck me at the time just how much of a problem this is all across the world. And then I also began to learn more about attrition. So what have you learned about the connection between onboarding, the first 100 days in your language, and attrition?
Well, a couple of key statistics that we found in the research we were doing. First and foremost, 40% of new hires globally will quit before the 1-year anniversary. 40% of employees will quit before they've been at the organization for a year. 22% will quit in the first 45 days. 4% globally will show up for the first day of work, hang out, go home that night, and never come back again. 4% of workers quit after just 1 day on the job. What was scarier to me, Brad, than these shocking statistics was that the typical employer had no idea what their percentages were. They weren't tracking them. They weren't paying attention to them. They weren't investing the time and effort to make sure their people were properly onboarding. Now, the research also shows that an employee who is part of a strong onboarding process, right, is 60-some% more likely to be more productive and 80% more likely to stay retained in the long term. And then it was interesting. We look and we say, okay, well, how did you define strong onboarding process, Joey? It was self-defined by the recipients or the survey respondents. They asked them, were you part of a strong onboarding program? And if they said yes, they tracked their productivity and they tracked their retention, and it skyrocketed above everybody else. So many organizations would benefit from just having a program of onboarding, let alone a well-designed, perfect program. Like, I'd love it to be a great program, a thoughtful program, a strategic program, but even just any program is going to be better than what most organizations have today.
And what you said there was the productivity. That's the thing, because we can say retention, and okay, so retention, we can validate the statistics, and quite frankly, they're out there. If you look for them, you'll find them. But it's the productivity that matters. It is the productivity where the real dollar gains occur.
That is definitely a big piece of it. I mean, we have a couple different gains. You know, we get the gains for the productivity. And if we doubt the validity of the statement that new hires aren't productive, I just ask anyone listening to think about your first few days on the job. Any job you've ever had. You started your own company, you went to work for a new employer, you became a parent, whatever it may be, any job you've ever had. The first few days, you do not know what you're doing. The first few weeks, you might not know what you're doing. How long does it take before you feel like, I kind of get what's going on here? In most organizations, that realization, that confidence comes weeks or months into the job. Over 50% of companies do less than 1 week of onboarding. Of the ones that do onboarding, over 50% do less than a week. Let me get this right, Brad. We want our employees to stay long-term, but we're only willing to invest less than a week to get them up to speed, to learn how we operate. It's just the math doesn't make sense. The other thing we know is that replacing an employee is really expensive. Again, depending on whose research you look at, somewhere between 100 and 300% of the cost of that employee's salary is what you will have to spend to replace a worker in that role. And by the way, that's before you start paying them. That's the cost of lost productivity, the cost of doing interviews, background checks, submitting resumes, all the things that have to happen to market and sell and fill the position. 100 to 300% of the annual salary. This isn't just, take care of your employees because you love them. This is take care of your employees because it directly impacts your bottom line.
And as someone who's spent a lot of time, as in years, researching this topic, all the stats that you're saying are like, It's not 40, it's 39%. Or the research I did said it was 42%, but it's all out there. Like, it's all really valid stuff. I want to ask you about the difference between a coworker and a colleague.
To me, the difference between a coworker and a colleague can best be summed up in the conversation that happens on Monday morning. On Monday morning, you're in the office and somebody walks in. Let's say you and I work together and you walk in and I say, "Hey, Brad, how was your weekend?" We're coworkers. If you walk in on Monday morning and I say, "Hey, Brad, how was your grandma's birthday party?" Now we're colleagues. And the difference there is I know enough about you to know what you were doing over the weekend, probably because I asked you on Friday, "Hey, Brad, what are you going to do this weekend?" You said, "Oh, I'm going to this birthday party." And then I remembered long enough to ask you about it on Monday. That's the difference between somebody who works in the same building as me, a coworker, and somebody who I have a personal and emotionally connective relationship with, a colleague. It's a lot easier to quit a job than to quit a friend. And if we have friends at work and we have connection at work and we have colleagues at work, by default, we will stay longer. The research shows this time and time again across all industries. So that's why we should be striving to deepen these relationships with our team members instead of, well, if it doesn't work out with them, we'll just fire them and hire a new one.
How do you think employers or leaders can curate that experience? Because you can turn up at a workplace as an employee and just meet someone friendly or someone that you get along with. But I feel that there is somewhat of a curation that can be done for an environment. We spoke for so long before we started recording. I can't even remember if we spoke about this when we were recording or not, but I'll bring it back. At Southwest Airlines, the CEO was saying that they need to care for people in the totality of their lives. How can leaders or business owners, perhaps, how do you think that they can try to curate that environment?
Well, Brad, I think there's so many things they can do. One of the things I would encourage everyone to consider is not, well, what is the best way to do it, but rather, what is the fastest way to start? Like, I don't need you to develop the, comprehensive mentor program where we pair a long-term employee with a brand new hire to show them the ropes. That's really valuable. A lot of companies have done that with incredible success. But it can be something as simple as, in the interview process, asking some questions like, "Hey, if you were at the grocery store and you had $20 that you had to spend on an indulgence snack for yourself, and it was okay if it wasn't super healthy, what would you buy?" And then when they show up for the first day on the job, that snack is on their desk. That's you taking the time to ask the kind of questions that give you the answers, that you record those answers, and then you act on that information to create a remarkable experience for an employee in the future. This stuff isn't rocket science. This is just paying attention to what matters to people. One of the things I love to do with, lots of times, I'll meet with a leadership team and I'll say, "Hey, tell me an employee that we're having a hard time getting the value out of them we're hoping to get out of and building the kind of connection with that we're hoping to connect." And they'll say an employee's name. And I'll take my computer and I'll log on to Facebook, Instagram, X, Snapchat, all the social media channels, and I will search for that person's name. And usually something comes up. Almost always something comes up. And then I will scroll through their feed and point out things about them. Oh, look, they like to vacation on the beach. Oh, look, they go there every year to the same place at the same beach. Oh, as it turns out, here's a post where they're talking about the fact that their grandparents have had this cabin on this beach for over 50 years, and the whole family goes every year on the 4th of July. So now when we're leading up to the 4th of July and we say, "Hey, it's getting up on the weekend. Brad, you going to be going to the beach? Here's a little gift I got you, some towels. And they're embroidered with the names of Grandma and Grandpa on them." Now we're having a totally different conversation. I think the smartest, best employers of choice in the future are going to be the ones that care about their employees in terms of what happens between 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. every day, as they care about what happens between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m.
Yeah.
Meaning you got to care about what's going on in their life outside of work almost as much as you care about what's going on inside of work.
That's that's really insightful. I remember reading the story that you mentioned at the beginning, where you arrive on your first day and the thing that you said that was under $20 was on your desk, and just thinking, how would that feel? Like you would just smile and go, how did they know that that's my favorite? Like, and you might not even connect it, but I love that idea. I want to ask you, what do you see as the parallels between customer experience, first 100 days, and employee experience, first 100 days? Clearly, they're both people. They're both stakeholders, to use the worst word that I can. What are the parallels?
Humans are humans are humans, Brad. Whether they're humans that you're trying to get to buy your product or service, or they're the humans you employ to deliver your product and service to those who are buying it as customers. We all are unique and different as human beings, but there are some fundamental principles that underlie the human condition that we should be paying attention to as leaders. For example, when someone is new, they have a mix of both excitement and fear. They're excited about what might happen, but they're fearful that it might not turn out the way they hoped. This happens with a customer. This happens with an employee. After they make a decision to purchase a product, they begin to doubt the decision they just made. In the customer context, we call this buyer's remorse. In the employee context, after they accept a job offer, they begin to doubt the decision they just made. I call this new hire's remorse. They're the exact same things. Why? Because we're still talking about the human brain. We're still talking about a dopamine release that then, when it recedes, shifts the feelings from joy, euphoria, and excitement to fear, doubt, and uncertainty. We look on the customer side that we've done this hundreds of times, thousands of times, tens of thousands of times. We know how our business operates. We know how our processes work. But a brand new customer is like, I'm not exactly sure. The same holds true with our new hires. We've had people working in our company for weeks, months, years. But a new hire has been there for hours. They don't even know where the bathroom is. And we're expecting them to know how to use our software system? It's like the basic fundamental aspects of humanity so often get overlooked in a work context. And for years, we had this trope that was, oh, it's business, not personal. I'm so fed up with that. It's all personal. It's all personal because it's things you're doing around or about me and my reaction to the things you're doing. And when I react, that's me doing something that now impacts your experience of this exchange. So what are we doing to be more socially aware, more emotionally aware, more mentally aware of what is going on with the other humans we interact with?
That's good. One of the things that you mention in the book is advocating that employers should send the questions to the candidate before the interview. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, I think so many employers believe that the interview should be a gigantic gotcha moment where we ask really hard questions that they can't possibly answer, or we stump them with the challenging nature of our answers. Is that modeling anything that we want them to do as an employee?
No.
Probably not. I don't want you ad-libbing how you answer questions to a client or a prospect. I want you to know a script, or to know a plan, or know key talking points, or know the details of our product so that you can intelligently and accurately answer queries from a customer or from a prospect. So why wouldn't we give our employees, our team members, that same level of respect and consideration? Do we really think that asking them the question before the interview, sending it over the week before and saying, hey, next week, I'm going to ask you 5 questions. These are the 5 questions I'm going to ask you. I may ask you some others, but these are the 5 we're going to start with. Do we really think that would be a bad idea? I think it's a great idea, because what you also find out is if they've given no thought to preparing their answers, you've just learned a ton. You've learned that even with advance notice, even with the opportunity to do homework, this person's going to just dial it in and wing it. Well, for some roles, that might be a kind of person you're willing to hire, but for a lot of roles, that's not the person you want to hire. So why not use the interview process as an accurate feedback loop for what it's going to be like to actually do business with this person and have them on the team, as opposed to setting it into this kind of draconian, elevated level of I'm up here as the employer and you're down here as the employee and you better get the answers right and I'll decide whether or not you're going to get hired. It's like, no, we can think differently about this.
There's a lady in Melbourne, Joey Coleman, and she has a marketing company and is a champion for neurodiverse people. And in the interview process, what she does is she asks the candidate at the end, are there any questions that you want to do over? Because she has a predominantly neurodiverse workforce, they can sometimes think or overthink, given their situation, one particular thing. And she said, genuinely, we'll delete the answers that we've written and we'll go to that. So it's a different take than what you said, with a completely different purpose. But I guess there are different ways to humanize the interview process.
You know, Brad, it is different, but I love that you shared that. It's so in alignment though, right? It's kind. It's graceful. It's meeting the human being that you're having a conversation with where they are in their humanity. I love that. As someone who skews more neurodivergent and has many friends who are neurodivergent, I love this idea of being able to say, wouldn't we all love a do-over sometimes? I mean, we talk about this even as the podcast. You know, you're a very gracious host. And one of the things you said last time, it's like, hey, Joey, and if you make a mistake, just pause, go back and start the question over again, and we'll edit it out. Don't we all wish we had an eraser or an editor for our life where we could say, could I try that again? Could I say that differently? And I don't know about you, Brad, but when somebody does that, what it says to me is this is someone who really cares. They want to make sure that they're understood. They want to make sure that they put their best foot forward. Isn't that what we all want to do as humans? I don't think most humans are going through life, I'm just going to be who I am and to heck with everybody else on the planet. That's not how most humans who are non-psychopaths are hardwired. Most humans are hardwired to say, I want to be in interaction with other people. I want to be in a community. I want to have friends. I want to have colleagues. I want to have associates. I want to have people that, I know about them and they know about me. This is the very fundamental nature of what this species is. Why are we trying to make it something different in the workplace?
Because that's how the people did it before, and the people did it before, and the people did it before, and we think that that's how we've got to do it, but it doesn't actually work that well.
It doesn't. And here's the thing where I would actually posit that, yes, that's how the people did it before. But once we go back about 2 levels, that's not how they used to do it.
Yeah.
Right? So here's the challenge. I grew up in a small farming community in northwestern Iowa. One of the things I always thought was fascinating from a customer point of view is you treated your customers well. Why? Because all your customers knew each other. And if you treated a customer poorly in this small town, they were going to tell all their friends and neighbors and relatives who all happen to live in the same small town that you treated them poorly. And then those people were going to come to you and be like, why did you treat them poorly? What was the story? What was going on? So there was consequence for action. In an employer context, when we started to be able to say, well, we can hire anybody, and when we started to expand our hiring pool beyond people who lived within 10 miles of our office, when we added transportation, when we extremely added the whole planet as a potential employee base, post-COVID, when it's like, hey, anybody with an internet connection can work remotely for you, I think what it did is it gave us this warped permission that we didn't have to treat people properly, because if I treated you poorly, Brad, and you ended up quitting, well, then I'll just go hire 5 other people that want a job. Instead of saying, no, there's a consequence to our actions as humans. We got to be thoughtful. We got to be considerate.
What an excellent take. I love it. Thank you. So that ends part 1 of the Joey Coleman episode, Never Lose an Employee Again. Joey's great, isn't he? I hope that you can join me next week to conclude with part 2 of Joey Coleman, talking about never lose an employee again. Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review for the podcast, that'd be really helpful to other like-minded entrepreneurs, and then we can grow our community. If you want to find out more about our guests, head over to evolutionpartners.com.au/podcast, where you can find show notes and other additional reading. Hope to see you back next week. Until then, keep thriving.